So think about the last time you received an infuriating email.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. Your heart rate immediately spikes. Your fingers are like hovering right over the keyboard, and you're just totally consumed by this biological urge to fire back.
Yeah, the defense mechanism kicks right in.
Exactly. But right before you actually type that first defensive sentence, there's a pause. It might just be, I don't know, a fraction of a second, but it's there.
And that fraction of a second is honestly the most critical window in human behavioral psychology. I mean, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, he really captured the essence of this.
What did he say?
He observed that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and what executive coaches David Noble and Carol Kauffman have discovered, through decades of research, mind you, is that the world's most successful CEOs actually use that exact fraction of a second to completely alter reality.
And that is exactly the mission for our deep dives today. We are pulling from Noble and Kaufman's groundbreaking book, Real-Time Leadership.
Such an incredible resource.
It really is. I mean, they've spent tens of thousands of hours behind closed doors with leaders who are, navigating massive corporate transitions, hostile takeovers, global crises.
High-stakes stuff.
The highest stakes. And the core thesis they present is that when the pressure is on, our biological instinct is to just collapse that space between stimulus and response.
Right. We just react on autopilot. We let the stimulus completely dictate our behavior.
So to counter that, they created this system called the MOVE framework, M-O-V-E.
Yeah, it's an acronym that outlines a systematic method for opening up that space and literally slowing down time.
Walk us through what those letters stand for.
Sure. So M stands for be mindfully alert. O is generate options. V is validate your vantage point. And E is engage and affect change.
Okay, got it.
And when you watch top-tier leaders operate in a crisis, they're actively running this mental software to override, well, what the authors call the single greatest threat to high-stakes decision-making.
Which is?
The default reflex.
Okay, let's explore what that actually looks like in practice for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Because, how does a default reflex actually sabotage someone who is otherwise highly competent?
So there's this phenomenal example from the source material about a Fortune 50 executive named Matt.
Oh, right, the interview guy.
Exactly. So Matt was brilliant. He was the odds-on favorite to be the next CEO of his massive, incredibly complex organization.
The golden child, basically.
Pretty much. But the company was facing severe headwinds, and the board needed a leader to navigate this really painful restructuring.
Okay.
So Matt flies in for his final make-or-break interview with the board's nominating committee. He walks into the room, and the pressure is just palpable.
I can imagine.
But instead of stepping back and projecting this visionary leadership, Matt immediately drops into the weeds.
He essentially turns into a human encyclopedia.
That's exactly it. He spoke in paragraphs instead of sentences. He just inundated the committee with granular operational data, supply chain metrics, tactical logistics.
Just word vomiting data?
Yeah, because he was desperately trying to prove how smart he was. And by the time he walked out of that room, he knew he had sunk his own ship.
Which is brutal. The board almost immediately shifted their favor to an outside candidate, right?
They did. And the thing is, Matt failed not because he lacked intelligence, but because his brain relied on this highly myelinated neural pathway. That was his default reflex.
Because throughout his entire career, whenever he faced pressure, his winning move was to show absolute mastery of the details.
Exactly. That pattern recognition is what got him promoted up to that point. It was his survival mechanism.
But the board didn't need a survival mechanism.
No, because the brain is incredibly efficient. Under extreme stress, the basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain responsible for habit formation, it just takes over. It runs the old script to save cognitive energy.
So Matt defaulted to information dispenser mode.
Right. But the board did not need an information dispenser. They were facing a massive workforce reduction. They needed a visionary who could project strategic clarity, but also show deep human compassion.
And Matt just completely misread the room.
Totally. Because he lacked the framework to see the situation multidimensionally.
And this brings up what the authors call the 3 dimensions of leadership. It's basically a diagnostic lens, right?
Yeah, it consists of the external dimension, the internal dimension, and the interpersonal dimension.
So if we look at Matt's disastrous interview, he was just hyperfixated on the external.
Solely focused on the external goal of proving his business acumen. And because of that tunnel vision, He entirely neglected the internal dimension.
which would be his own physiological need to project calm, grounded authority.
Precisely. And furthermore, he completely failed at the interpersonal dimension. He wasn't reading the emotional state of the humans sitting across from him.
He wasn't connecting. He was just broadcasting.
Broadcast mode, exactly.
But I love the narrative twist in the book here. So right after this terrible interview, Matt meets with his executive coaches in a hotel room to try and salvage his final presentation for the next day.
The post-mortem meeting.
Right. And during this incredibly tense session, Matt checks his phone, and he sees that his company's stock has just dropped 15% in a matter of hours.
And 15% is a catastrophic loss of market capitalization.
For a normal executive, a 15% drop during a succession crisis is like a trigger for a full-blown panic attack.
Oh, it's the ultimate amygdala hijack.
Yet Matt's reaction is entirely counterintuitive. He looks at his phone, calmly excuses himself, makes a brief phone call to his team, walks back into the hotel room, sits down, and refocuses his absolute undivided attention on the coaching session.
He doesn't sweat. He doesn't spiral.
Nothing. And the coaches realize in that moment that Matt actually possesses an incredible superpower.
Yeah.
He has this immense internal capacity for calm under unimaginable pressure.
He just had no idea how to channel it during his interview.
Which is so ironic. The exact emotional regulation he needed in the boardroom was readily available to him.
But his default reflex blocked him from accessing it.
Right. Okay. So I understand the theory here, but let's look at the mechanics. Because overriding a biological habit circuit when your company's stock is tanking or you're facing a hostile board, it seems nearly impossible in real time.
It is incredibly difficult.
Like if you hit a patch of ice while driving, your basal ganglia screams at you to slam on the brakes. You can read textbooks all day about steering into the skid, but in the microsecond your car loses traction, biology wins.
That's a great analogy.
So how is a leader supposed to realistically override their deepest survival instincts when the stakes are that high?
Well, you cannot override a deeply ingrained biological instinct through sheer willpower alone. You just can't. You have to give the brain a new overriding objective.
Meaning you have to define the target first.
Exactly. You have to clearly define the target before you can adjust the physical reflex required to hit it. And this brings us squarely to the first of the three dimensions, external goals.
Okay, break that down for us.
If you don't have absolute crystal clear clarity on what you are trying to achieve in the physical world, your brain will simply revert to its default defense mechanism.
And the book illustrates this beautifully with the story of Cheryl.
Oh, Cheryl's case is fascinating.
She is this powerhouse executive. She took her previous company and quadrupled its revenue to $1 billion.
Which is an insane track record.
Right. So based on that, she gets recruited to be the CEO of a $10 billion consumer brand. Her mandate is hypergrowth.
Naturally.
But just a few months into her tenure, the COVID-19 pandemic hits. The global economy shuts down overnight.
And a global shutdown is the ultimate stress stimulus.
So how did her team react?
Well, for Cheryl's executive team, their default reflex was what the authors categorize as fire, ready, aim.
Just pure panic mode.
Yeah, the threat response was activated, and the team wanted to instantly jump into tactical, frantic problem solving. Everyone wanted to retreat to their respective silos, lock down their budgets, and just start fixing micro problems to feel a sense of control.
But Cheryl recognized that letting them scatter like that would be fatal.
It would have destroyed the company.
So instead of reacting to the stimulus, she forces the entire executive team into an all-day slingshot meeting.
I love that term, slingshot meeting.
She literally halts all tactical execution and pulls them backward to launch them forward.
The mechanics of that meeting are just brilliant, because by forcing cognitive friction, making them stop and think when they desperately wanted to just act, she broke the autopilot sequence.
She didn't just ask them what to do.
No, she forced them to systematically define the what, who, when, where, and why of their entirely new reality. They created the space to establish 5 very specific external priorities.
And one of those priorities was to radically decentralize decision-making down the chain of command.
Which was crucial.
Yeah, they realized that if every decision had to funnel up to the executive suite during a rapidly evolving global crisis, the bottleneck would just destroy them.
Exactly. Defining that external goal drew the map they needed to navigate the crisis. But setting external goals in high-stakes environments requires a deeper understanding of probability and risk.
Because things rarely go exactly to plan.
Right. The authors introduced this concept about how organizations project outcomes. When leaders set an external goal, they typically rely on a probability distribution curve.
You mean like the classic bell curve?
A classic bell curve, exactly. Almost all organizational energy, forecasting, and strategic planning goes straight to the middle of that curve, the highest point.
In corporate finance, we often call that the base case. It's the plan you confidently present to the board. Like, if we execute this strategy, revenue grows by 8%.
It's the safest, most statistically likely bet. The authors refer to this as the EEP, the expected estimated performance.
EEP.
But the fundamental flaw in leadership strategy is that focusing solely on the EEP creates systemic blindness to the extremes.
The tails of the curve.
Exactly. The mandate from the source material is that leaders must actively learn to live in the tails of that bell curve,
So looking at the far left tail.
which represents the disastrous worst-case outcomes,
And the far right tail.
which represents the spectacular windfall successes.
And Cheryl's $10 billion company only had base case plans.
They had meticulous plans for predictable growth. But they had never spent a single afternoon planning for the far left tail. They had zero contingency for a catastrophic overnight drop in global demand.
Which is why her team almost panicked. They were completely unmoored.
Preparing for the tails is what separates reactive managers from real-time leaders. If you only plan for the middle of the curve, any deviation from the expected norm is processed by the brain as a threat.
Okay, I hear you. But honestly, this sounds incredibly logical on paper, but if you put this into practice, there's a glaring psychological trap here. If I'm leading a team and I force them to constantly stare at the far left tail of that curve, global pandemics, total supply chain collapses, hostile takeovers, my team's threat response is going to be permanently activated.
That's a very fair point.
Right. Staring at disaster scenarios triggers the exact same amygdala hijack we're trying to avoid. How do you actively plan for catastrophe without paralyzing your organization with anxiety?
And that tension you're describing is exactly why you cannot execute Dimension 1 external goals without simultaneously mastering Dimension 2.
The internal landscape.
Precisely. Your observation is biologically accurate. Looking into the abyss of the left tail induces anxiety. And if your internal nervous system is in full panic, you cannot execute an external strategy.
You just lose access to your executive function.
Entirely. The leader must possess the internal emotional regulation to handle the reality of the left tail without transmitting that panic to the organization.
The book actually provides two sharply contrasting narratives of internal regulation failing. First, we have Samir.
Samir is a classic case.
He is a high-level executive who projects the aura of a Zen monk at the office. He's collected, softly spoken, nothing rattles him during intense meetings.
He looks like he has it all together.
But his executive coaches uncover that he is internalizing the organizational stress to such a toxic degree that when he goes home at night, he literally tears up paper shopping bags with his teeth to release the physical tension.
Tearing bags with his teeth. I mean, Samir's internal landscape was a war zone.
It's terrifying.
He was projecting an external facade of calm, but internally, his sympathetic nervous system was in chronic overdrive. The cortisol load was just immense.
And then on the other end of the spectrum is Alanya.
Right.
She is highly competent, deeply strategic, but her team absolutely despises working for her. They view her as arrogant, cold, completely withholding.
And the root cause there is fascinating.
It is. Alanya was taught by 3 generations of her family that you never ever show vulnerability or share personal details in a professional setting.
She built an impenetrable internal fortress.
Exactly, which her team misread as aloofness and disdain.
So both Samir and Alanya lacked an accurate map of their internal state. They were victims of their own unexamined physiological responses.
So how do you fix that?
The authors introduce a real-time diagnostic tool called the 5 C's framework. It's a method for rapidly assessing and shifting your internal state.
The 5 C's. What are they?
They stand for calm, clear, curious, compassionate, and courageous.
So it's essentially an emotional telemetry dashboard for you to check.
Exactly like a dashboard.
But diagnosing the problem is only half the battle, right? If Samir runs through this checklist before a contentious meeting and realizes his compassion score is sitting at a 2 out of 10, acknowledging that deficit doesn't magically fix it.
It definitely doesn't.
How does a leader actually shift their physiological state from a 2 to a 10 in the span of a 3-minute walk down the hallway to a boardroom?
The shift requires active somatic and cognitive intervention. So when Samir recognized his compassion score was a 2, he realized his body was preparing for combat.
Jaw tight. Shallow breathing.
Exactly. The first step is physiological regulation. You have to slow the breath to activate the vagus nerve.
Because that signals the parasympathetic nervous system to stand down.
Right. And the second step is cognitive reframing. Instead of viewing the combative colleague as an adversary to be defeated, Samir consciously chose to view the colleague's aggression as a symptom of overwhelming pressure.
Oh, so he shifted from judgment to inquiry.
Precisely. By intentionally lowering his physical defense mechanisms, he actually changed his behavior. He walked into the room, bypassed the empty chair at the head of the table, and physically sat next to the agitated colleague.
Wow.
He placed a hand on their shoulder and offered vocal support. That single internal audit fundamentally altered the power dynamics and emotional temperature of the entire room.
And the catalyst for that shift is a technique the authors call the Kauffman question.
Yes, named after one of the authors.
It's a micro-intervention used weekly by the legendary executive coach Marshall Goldsmith. In that tiny space between stimulus and response, you just ask yourself one focusing question.
Who do I want to be right now?
Who do I want to be right now? It sounds deceptively simple.
It does, but neurologically, it forces the brain out of the reactive habit circuit and engages the prefrontal cortex. It demands intentionality.
Do I want to be the leader who succumbs to the pressure and attacks my team? Or do I want to be the leader who anchors the room?
Exactly. If you're leading a team, think of the 5 C's like the warning lights on an instrument panel. If your internal calm light is flashing red before a difficult Zoom call, you have to pause.
You can't just ignore the telemetry.
You have to ask, who do I want to be right now? However, internal regulation, while essential, is not the final step.
Right, because you're dealing with other people.
You can be perfectly calm, perfectly clear, and have a beautifully designed external strategy. But if you walk into a room and inadvertently trigger the threat response of everyone around you, your strategy will fail.
Because leadership requires navigating the complex, often irrational human beings executing the strategy.
Which necessitates the third dimension, the interpersonal.
The interpersonal battlefield. The case study of Marcus perfectly illustrates the catastrophic cost of ignoring this dimension.
Marcus is a brilliant example.
He's the CEO of a massive energy company.
Cool.
Brilliant, hard-charging, data-driven executive. He knows the industry mechanics flawlessly.
But his board forces him into executive coaching.
Because his top talent is fleeing. He has a massive retention crisis among his highest-paid executives. So Marcus sits down for his first coaching session, and for the first 15 minutes, he just delivers this rapid-fire, aggressive monologue.
Just venting.
Venting about how slow, incompetent, and disappointing his executive team is. He complains that he constantly has to micromanage them just to keep the company moving forward.
But Marcus's problem is entirely rooted in the neurology of leadership. The human brain is fundamentally an ancient survival machine.
How fast does it process threats?
Research indicates that it takes under 33 milliseconds, less time than a literal blink of an eye, for the human brain to process a facial expression, analyze the micromovements of the facial muscles, and determine if the person in front of them represents safety or danger.
Wait, really? 33 milliseconds?
Yes, it's incredibly fast. So before Marcus even spoke a single word in his executive meetings, his impatience, his simmering frustration, the tightness in his posture, all of those nonverbal cues were processed by his team's amygdalas.
He was constantly triggering their sympathetic nervous systems.
He was putting highly intelligent, experienced executives into a biological state of fight or flight merely by entering the room.
And when the threat center of the brain is activated, higher-order cognitive functions just begin to shut down.
Blood flow literally moves away from the prefrontal cortex.
You cannot innovate, you cannot collaborate, and you certainly cannot execute complex strategic problem-solving when your brain is convinced it's actively being hunted by an apex predator.
Right. Marcus was neurologically disabling his own team and then getting angry at them for underperforming.
So what's the biological countermove?
Leaders must actively learn how to trigger the brain's reward center, the parasympathetic nervous system. The source material utilizes a framework for this called the ARC of motivation.
ARC.
Yes, it stands for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. These are not merely corporate buzzwords. They represent the 3 fundamental psychological needs that must be met for a human being to function at their highest capacity.
Let's break those down. Autonomy is the deep psychological need to feel like you are the author of your own life.
Right.
that you have control over your work and decisions.
Yes, and relatedness is the evolutionary need for the tribe feeling psychologically safe, understood, and connected to the people around you.
And competence is the intrinsic desire to master your environment and feel effective.
And Marcus was systematically dismantling all three of these pillars.
So how did they intervene?
Well, the intervention required Marcus to rebuild the ARC entirely. Let's look at how he achieved this. The most immediate crisis was relatedness. His team felt despised.
They hated him.
So the coach helped Marcus develop a unique visualization technique to bypass his critical judgments.
Oh, this is the 10-year-old thing.
Exactly. Before his next high-stakes board meeting, Marcus intentionally looked around the room at his highly paid, deeply experienced executive team, and in his mind, he visualized them as 10-year-old children.
I have to stop here because this specific piece of advice feels, I don't know, highly problematic.
How so?
Visualizing an experienced chief financial officer or a veteran board member as a 10-year-old child sounds incredibly condescending. If I found out my CEO was imagining me in grade school while I was presenting a quarterly earnings report, I'd feel infantilized, not respected.
Sure.
How does this visualization not just breed arrogance?
That is a crucial distinction to make. The visualization is a psychological hack strictly for the leader's internal state. It is not a reflection of the team's intellectual capacity.
Yeah.
Marcus was not treating them like children intellectually. He was not questioning their financial modeling or strategic insights.
No, what's the point of the hack?
The purpose is to recognize that fundamental human vulnerabilities, the fear of failure, the deep desire to belong, the anxiety of not being enough, those core emotional needs never age out.
Oh, I see.
An executive terrified of missing a massive revenue target is experiencing the exact same underlying biological distress as a 10-year-old terrified of failing a math test.
That makes sense.
By visualizing them as children, Marcus tapped into his own... Exactly. Marcus had to systematically repair the other two pillars. To restore autonomy, he had to stop micromanaging.
So instead of dictating the exact tactical steps,
He began offering bounded choices. He would define the external goal, the parameters of success, and then tell his executives, the path you take to get there is entirely yours to design. This handed the locus of control back to the team.
and to restore competence, he had to change how he communicated when things went wrong.
Because previously, when an executive made an error, Marcus would immediately jump in, correct them, and tell them how he would have done it.
He was basically stealing their reps.
Yes. To build competence, he started asking coaching questions. What did you learn from this outcome? How would you adjust the model for next quarter? He allowed them to demonstrate their own mastery.
And Marcus's transformation is actually the perfect argument against the golden rule.
It really is.
From childhood, we are taught to treat others the way we want to be treated. But the authors argue that for leaders navigating the interpersonal dimension, the golden rule is actively destructive.
Because it assumes a baseline of psychological uniformity. It assumes everyone's ARC is wired identically to yours.
Right. Marcus was a highly autonomous, thick-skinned leader who thrived on blunt, aggressive feedback and immense pressure.
So he treated his team that way because he genuinely thought it was the best way to operate.
But treating his team that way was crushing employees who needed collaborative support, nuanced guidance, and vocal reassurance to perform at their best.
Leaders must abandon the golden rule and master the platinum rule.
Which is,
Treat others the way they need to be treated.
treat them how they need to be treated.
Mm.
Wow. So if we synthesize the blueprint up to this point, we know we have to stop the default reflex.
Yep.
We must map our external goals, ensuring we don't just plan for the EEP base case, but actively prepare for the 10x outcomes in the left and right tails.
Exactly.
We have to monitor our internal landscape using the 5 Cs, asking, who do I want to be right now to maintain physiological regulation? And we must manage the interpersonal battlefield by rebuilding autonomy, relatedness, and competence, applying the platinum rule.
That's the map.
But cognitive awareness of these 3 dimensions doesn't automatically translate into physical execution. Knowing the map is not the same as knowing how to drive the car.
That's very true.
When the crisis hits, how do we actually generate the right physical moves?
This is the transition from willpower to way power.
Way power, explain that.
In leadership psychology, willpower is your agency. It's your determination, your drive to push through an obstacle. But way power is your cognitive capacity to generate multiple, distinct pathways forward to overcome that obstacle.
Okay.
The authors reference research from psychologist C.R. Snyder on hope theory, specifically looking at marathon runners.
The findings there are fascinating. It turns out that having immense willpower, the ability to just grit your teeth and endure massive amounts of pain,
Right.
is not the primary predictor of success in a marathon.
No, willpower alone will cause you to break. Yeah. The runners who consistently finish and finish well possess high willpower combined with high way power. When they hit the wall at mile 20 and their body is screaming to stop, they don't just try to push harder using the exact same stride.
They have alternative strategies.
Exactly. They have alternative physiological and mental strategies. They can shift their foot strike, alter their breathing cadence, or completely reframe their internal monologue. They have multiple ways to win.
So in the movie framework, way power is actively generated through what the authors call the 4 stances.
Yes. These are 4 distinct energetic postures a leader can adopt in any given situation.
Let's walk through them.
The first stance is lean in. This is the active, decisive, confrontational posture. It's taking charge, directing action, setting mandates, and driving aggressively for results.
For almost every successful executive, lean in is their default setting. It's the posture that gets you promoted in a corporate environment.
It is highly effective, but it cannot be your only tool. The second stance is lean back. This is the analytical, data-gathering, observant posture. It requires stepping off the dance floor and going up to the balcony to observe the broader systemic patterns before making a move.
The third stance is lean with. This is the collaborative, empathetic, supportive posture. It involves putting your arm around someone, coaching them, prioritizing the relationship, and focusing on cultural cohesion.
And then we arrive at the fourth stance, which is arguably the most difficult for high-achieving leaders to master. Don't lean.
Don't lean.
This stance is characterized by stillness, receptivity, and allowing intuition to surface without forcing immediate action.
To understand how shifting these stances creates way power, the source material provides 3 distinct narratives. First, we have Stevie.
Ah, Stevie.
She's an executive known affectionately as the Powerhouse Pixie.
Great nickname.
So Stevie is managing a massive, highly sensitive workforce reduction in Frankfurt, Germany. Thousands of jobs are on the line. The German labor laws are incredibly complex.
It's a minefield.
And suddenly, the worst-case scenario happens. The confidential details of the layoffs leak to the press, and Stevie knows exactly which colleague leaked the information.
And because Stevie is a powerhouse pixie, her biological default reflex is to lean in.
Go on the attack.
Her immediate instinct is to hunt down the colleague, aggressively confront them about the betrayal, and launch a massive, forceful damage control operation.
But because she has been practicing the MMOVE framework, she recognizes the physiological spike of anger. She creates that fraction of a second of space.
She pauses.
Right. She realizes that leaning in right now, while her sympathetic nervous system is highly activated, will likely cause her to make critical emotional errors that could violate strict European labor regulations.
So she intentionally shifts her stance to generate a new pathway. She chooses to lean back.
She steps away from the emotional sting of the betrayal.
Exactly. She locks herself in her office, gathers the objective legal facts, reviews the communication protocols, and simply waits. She uses the 5 C's to regulate her internal state, deliberately moving her calm score from a 1 to an 8 before she takes a single physical step.
Shifting from lean in to lean back saves her from a massive unforced error.
It absolutely did.
The second narrative involves Max and Gemma. This is a highly relatable interpersonal dynamic. Max is a highly competent chief operating officer, and his close friend Gemma has just been promoted to be his CEO.
But the power dynamic fractures their relationship.
It does. Gemma transforms into a brutal micromanager. She commandeers Max's resources, second-guesses his operational decisions, and makes his daily life so miserable that he starts pouring himself vodka martinis the moment he walks through his front door.
That's a rough situation. Max's natural reflex as a seasoned COO defending his territory was to lean in and fight. He was prepared to go to war with Gemma over his budget and his operational autonomy.
But his executive coach helps him evaluate the 4 stances. If Max leans in and fights his CEO, he'll destroy their remaining friendship and likely lose his job.
And if he leans back and just analyzes the situation, he remains a victim of her micromanagement.
So they explore the third stance, lean with. Max takes a step back and asks why Gemma is behaving this way.
He realizes she isn't acting with malice.
No, she is acting out of terror. Gemma is under crushing pressure from activist investors on the board who want immediate margin improvements. Her threat response is permanently activated.
So Max makes a profound strategic choice. For their next one-on-one meeting, his external goal is not to fight for his budget. His goal is simply to help Gemma feel physiologically safer by the end of the hour.
He leans with her.
Yes, he offers support, validates her pressure, and aligns himself as her ally. That single shift instance diffused her threat response and saved their working relationship for months.
The third example is Akash. Akash is a brilliant, highly analytical leader, but he is paralyzing his entire organization with excessive process. He demands 90-page, data-dense monthly review decks from every team.
90 pages.
90 pages of data every single month is an incredible drain on organizational bandwidth.
It is the epitome of a heavy lean-in governance structure. Akash genuinely believes that granular, aggressive oversight is the only way to mitigate risk and ensure success.
But his organization is suffocating.
The coaching intervention for Akash involved mapping the 4 stances directly to operational risk levels.
The coach helped Akash realize that he didn't need to apply the lean instance to every single project.
For low-risk, routine operational tasks, Akash learned to deploy the lean-back stance. He implemented a system of light governance.
He established the parameters, trusted his team's competence, and stepped away from the granular details.
This shift freed up hundreds of hours of bandwidth for both himself and his organization.
Okay, I can clearly track the utility of lean in, lean back, and lean with. You aggressively attack a problem, you analyze the data from the balcony, or you collaborate with the humans involved. But I have to challenge the fourth stance.
About lean.
Yeah, don't lean sounds suspiciously like freezing. It sounds like abdicating responsibility. In a high-stakes corporate crisis where time is literally millions of dollars, how is actively doing nothing a valid leadership strategy?
It's a vital question because don't lean is often miscategorized as a fear response. Freezing is an involuntary biological reaction triggered by the amygdala.
Right.
But don't lean is a highly disciplined, intentional cognitive pause. To understand its utility, we have to look at brainwave states. When you are aggressively striving for an answer, when you are leaning in, your brain is operating in a narrow, highly focused beta wave state.
You are intensely searching your existing mental database for a known solution.
You are relying on your myelinated pathways.
Exactly.
But complex, novel crises often require creative insights that do not exist in your historical database. If you continue to strive aggressively, you block the brain's ability to form new connections.
So how does don't lean fix that?
By intentionally taking the don't lean stance, by quieting the mind, physically stepping away from the whiteboard and stopping the active search, you allow the brain to shift out of the beta wave state.
Oh, I see.
You activate the default mode network, which operates more in the alpha and theta wave frequencies. This state allows your subconscious pattern recognition software, which processes vastly more peripheral data than your conscious mind, to connect disparate pieces of information and surface a novel insight.
Wow.
Don't lean creates the necessary cognitive vacuum for true intuition to appear.
So it's not freezing in the headlights. It's intentionally letting the subconscious do the heavy lifting when the conscious analytical brain has hit a wall. That reframes the concept entirely.
That's a very active choice.
So let's assume you've done the heavy lifting. You've paused. You've mapped your external goals and the tails. You've regulated your internal state. You've navigated the interpersonal ARC. You've utilized the 4 stances to generate multiple pathways forward.
Now you actually have to execute the physical move.
You need a mechanism to guarantee that the execution is flawless.
And this brings us to the final synthesizing tool in the MBE framework, the 10 out of 10 approach.
The 10 out of 10 approach.
This is the mechanism leaders use to neurologically prime their brain for perfect execution. And it is critical to clarify that this is not some mystical manifestation exercise. This protocol is rooted in hard performance psychology and neuroscience.
The book utilizes the incredible story of Laura Wilkinson to demonstrate this.
Her story gives me chills.
Laura is an elite Olympic platform diver. She is training for the 2000 Sydney Olympics, which is the absolute pinnacle of her career. But right before the games, disaster strikes. She shatters 3 bones in her right foot.
Heartbreaking.
She is placed in a cast and physically cannot practice. For 6 agonizing weeks, while her global competitors are executing hundreds of physical dives a day, Laura is grounded.
A standard athlete would view that as the catastrophic left tail and give up. But Laura utilized the 10 out of 10 approach. Because she could not physically practice, she practiced entirely in her mind.
She engaged in profound, hyper-detailed visualization. She visualized the physical sensation of climbing the concrete stairs to the platform.
The texture of the grip on the edge of the board.
Yes, She visualized the precise rotational velocity in the air, the exact tension in her core, and the microscopic entry point into the water. She ran this mental repetition flawlessly, hundreds of times a day.
And then,
When her caps was finally removed, she went to Sydney, hobbled up the stairs to the platform, and won the Olympic gold medal.
it's unbelievable. Laura's victory is a testament to the power of neuropriming. Functional MRI scans demonstrate that when you vividly and intensely visualize a complex physical or cognitive action, your brain actually fires the exact same neural pathways in the motor cortex as if you were physically performing the action.
You're literally building the neurological infrastructure and muscle memory for success before you take the first physical step.
Exactly. And the authors have distilled this 10 out of 10 approach down into 4 highly specific, actionable steps that any leader can apply to their immediate goals.
Let's hear them. Step 1.
Step 1, visualize what a 10 out of 10 outcome looks, feels, and sounds like. You have to make it as vivid and multisensory as Laura Wilkinson's dive.
If you were walking into a board meeting, who is in the room? What is the specific tone of their voice? What is the posture of the chairman? How does your own body feel when the presentation concludes perfectly?
Exactly. Paint the whole picture. Step 2, rate where your current reality is right now on that 1 to 10 scale. The vital instruction here is not to overanalyze the metric. Rely on your immediate gut instinct.
Are you currently a 4, a 6, an 8? Just
Like-
establish an honest baseline.
Right. Now, step 3 is where the psychology becomes incredibly effective because it flips the traditional script on self-evaluation.
How so?
You ask yourself, what are you doing right that gets you to that current number and not a single point lower?
Oh, I love that. For example, if you rate your team's current readiness at a 6, the natural instinct is to obsess over the 4 points you are missing.
But this step forces positive confrontation. Why aren't you a 5? What specific skills, resources, and past successes have already anchored you at a 6?
Positive confrontation. That's a great term.
It's essential because staring at the gap between a 6 and a 10 can be paralyzing. Forcing the brain to catalog the existing foundation builds the necessary self-efficacy and internal competence required to execute the final step.
And step 4.
Step 4. Ask yourself, what specific action can you take in the next 2 months to move your score up by just a half point?
A half point. Not, how do I radically transform my entire organization and jump from a 6 to a 10 by next quarter? Just a half point.
Just a tiny increment.
It reminds me of tuning a guitar. If you are playing a song and you notice the G string is slightly flat, you don't rip all the strings off the neck of the guitar and start restringing it in the middle of the performance.
No, that would ruin the show.
You just reach up and give the tuning peg a microscopic, millimeter-sized tweak. That tiny adjustment brings the entire instrument back into perfect harmony. Targeting a half-point improvement fundamentally lowers the barrier to entry for change.
It really does. It makes massive, long-term personal and organizational transformation feel completely achievable.
So, if we step back and view the entire architecture of the MOV framework, we can see how systematically it reprograms human behavior.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We did. We began by learning the neurological necessity of stopping our default reflexes in that minuscule space between stimulus and response.
We learned that to prevent the basal ganglia from taking over, we must map our external goals with absolute precision, ensuring we do not just rely on the EEP base case, but actively build contingency plans for the 10x outcomes in the left and right tails.
And we recognize that peering into those tails requires immense emotional regulation, which we achieve by auditing our internal landscape using the 5 C's: calm, clear, curious, compassionate, courageous.
And we learn to anchor that state by asking the Carol Kauffman question, who do I want to be right now?
We then explore the interpersonal dimension, acknowledging that leadership requires navigating the 33-millisecond biological threat responses of our teams.
We learn to replace the golden rule with the platinum rule, systematically rebuilding the ARC of motivational autonomy, relatedness, competence to foster profound psychological safety.
And finally, we discovered how to transition from sheer willpower to dynamic way power. We learned to utilize the 4 stances: lean in, lean back, lean with, and don't lean to generate multiple adaptable pathways to victory.
Sealing our strategy with the neuropriming power of the 10 out of 10 visualization techniques.
This is just a brilliant system.
The ultimate value of this framework is that its application is not limited to the boardroom during a catastrophic corporate crisis. This mental software is designed to be executed in the micro moments of your daily life.
Yeah, that's the best part.
The next time you feel your blood pressure spike during a frustrating conversation, or you notice your jaw clenching as you read an email, or you feel that overwhelming biological urge to just react, remember Viktor Frankl.
Find that tiny fraction of a second.
Widen the gap. That space is entirely yours to command.
To leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to process today, think about the single leadership trait you are most deeply proud of.
The defining characteristic that earned your current title and got you to where you are today.
Perhaps it's your relentless driving ambition, or your meticulous analytical rigor, or your deep protective empathy for your team. Now ask yourself, is it entirely possible that in your highest stakes, most stressful moments, your absolute greatest strength is actually mutating into your biggest liability?
That's a tough question to face.
It really is. What happens tomorrow if you intentionally choose to leave your favorite, most reliable weapon in the holster and try a completely different stance? It is a question that requires deep vulnerability to answer, but it is the exact pathway to real-time leadership.
Well said.
Until next time, stay curious, stay mindfully alert, and keep exploring the space between stimulus and response.